I'd like to call this meeting, the Clay County Commission, to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'll join me in that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Nolte?
Here.
Commissioner Withington?
Here.
Commissioner Lawson? Here. Commissioner Wagner?
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson? Here. Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
That brings us to approval of our agenda. Is there a motion related to this evening's agenda? Motion's been made for the approval of this evening's agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, you'll recognize to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Withington?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes. That next item is public comments. Are there any members of the public who would wish to speak this evening? Seeing none. That brings us to our public hearing on the 2023 proposed budget. Administrator, if you'd like to proceed.
Good evening, Commissioners. I just have a very brief presentation to introduce the 2023 budget and open it up and then proceed with the public hearing. So again, just as a reminder, this is in relation many months of work by staff and by the Commission. I believe you've held like 6 or 7 workshops on the budget from the beginning of the process. And the components of the budget that we want to emphasize is the investing in public safety, the investing in infrastructure, and the investing in our people. And so again, just as a recap for the public, the total authorization for the 2023 budget is $156.5 million. We do have some one-time funds that are allocated from ARPA and the Emergency Rental Assistance Program along with bond proceeds. And so when we reduce that, we're looking at a proposed budget of $135.4 million. That is a change from last year's adopted budget of approximately 14%. That increase is reflective of inflationary costs, additions to the budget, and also increases in our personnel costs. So of the $156.5 million, the funding source for the proposed budget has 31% coming from sales tax, 36% comes from reserves, however, recognizing that included in those reserves are ARPA funds and bond proceeds. We also then have 4% from property tax, 11% from fees, fines, and licenses, then we have transfers of 8%, miscellaneous, and outside funding. Sales tax is one of the, in fact, the largest operating revenue that the county receives on an annual basis. And so we have 3 types of sales tax. A general sales tax that is estimated to bring in $33 million, a law enforcement sales tax that is specific for law enforcement to bring in $5.4 million, and use tax or catalog internet sales tax estimated at $9 million. So total sales tax projected for 2023 is $47.49 million. Of the general sales tax, that $33 million, the bar chart in the center tries to depict how those funds are allocated. So of the $33 million in general sales tax, almost 52% is going to the general fund, 27% goes to law enforcement fund, Road and Bridge gets 7%, Parks gets about 3%, and then we have some small funds along with the TIF fund getting 10%. But of the general fund revenue, sales tax of 52% that is going to the general fund, there is in the proposed budget allocation of those funds to other operating funds to cover their operating costs. So basically 52% of that general fund money, the $17 million, is also going to the law enforcement fund. And then you also see we still have some additional small funds at the bottom, with the general fund retaining almost 41% of the sales tax for operations of the general fund. So when we look at tax-supported revenues, we have sales tax and we have property tax. So on the left is a pie chart that basically tries to identify, of all the sales tax, the 3 different categories of sales tax, the $47.49 million, how is that allocated in the budget? So law enforcement is receiving 48% of sales tax, general capital use tax that is in 3 different capital funds, along with road and bridge and some of the other funds. We have 2 property taxes. We're estimating in 2023 that property tax will bring in approximately a little bit less than $5.4 million. We have 2 mill levies. One is for the general fund. That represents 26% of the income. That also is reflected of a mill levy rollback that the Commission approved earlier. And then 74% of the property tax is dedicated specifically for our road and bridge fund. So of the $156.5 million in the budget, how is it allocated? So 37% of the total authorized budget is personnel. 35% is contractual, followed by 6% in commodities, 8% in capital, 5% is set aside for reserves, and 8% are transfers from one fund to another. Contractual is somewhat high because that is reflective of the ARPA projects, and so kind of skews when we look at $156.5 million. But so kind of want to stepping that down, and you've seen this chart before during the budget process. While the authorization is $156.5 million, if we reduce the ARPA and bond, that one-time money that we talked about in the first slide, that brings it down to $135.4 million. But also included that is what we consider double entries, and those are the transfers. If we transfer money out of a fund, that's an expense. When we put it into another fund and then we spend that money, that's an expense again. Have to do that for accounting purposes, but when you're trying to get to the actual operating budget, you want to kind of take out those double expense entries. So that brings the budget down to 122.7, and then included in that is still reserves, which again, is not authorized. We don't want to spend that unless we have to. So taking that away, it gets to an operating budget of $114.6 million.
Yes, I didn't mean to interrupt, but could you make sure you're speaking more into your microphone? I think there might be some people who are need
Sorry,
to hear
thank you.
better.
Apparently it wasn't even
Thank you.
on, so, and I thought I apologize for that. Oh, I think we want to get out of here before midnight, so. But I do, again, want to make sure there's clear understanding of an authorized budget of the 156.5, but getting it down to what is our true operating budget on an annual basis, and that is the $114.6 million. So we talked last week a lot about what is our new normal, what is our new base. Technically, that is now our new base. And so when we look at the operating expenditures and how is that allocated, this is typically what you see more of expenditures from a public entity, which is 51% of our expenditures are personnel costs, 32% of that is contractual, 8% is commodities, and 9% are in capital. And so how are we investing in? You've seen this information before, and I'm not going to read all the bullets, but certainly investing in public safety. So we are adding staff in public safety. We are adding 5.1 or 5.5 FTEs, so 5.5. We have 2 that we're fully funding in the Sheriff's Department for the Impaired Driving Enforcement Unit that are grant funded. We also are adding a victim advocate in the prosecutor's office. We're upgrading a part-time criminal investigator to full-time, and we're adding 2 full-time deputy juvenile officers. And those are all the only staffing additions that we have proposed in the 2023 budget. We're also investing in public safety when it comes to equipment and facilities for our public safety. So certainly the vehicle replacement program, the radio replacement program. We also have allocation of funds to physically relocate our dispatch console to the Consolidated Dispatch Center that is being built at the City of Gladstone. Vehicles for the prosecutor's office and some furniture, but also technology upgrades in the courtroom and in the detention facility, along with safety improvements at both of those facilities also. We're investing in our infrastructure with funding for updating the county-wide comprehensive plan. We also are proposing to do the design of the Stockdale Bridge replacement. And then we have our annual programs, our annual road preservation and bridge maintenance program, culvert maintenance program, and then we have some capital associated in our public works along with our facilities. So when we talk about infrastructure, we're not simply just talking about roads, bridges, and culverts, but we're also talking about our vertical infrastructure and our facilities. So some repairs to roofs and some replacements to doors here in this particular facility. We're also investing in equipment for our infrastructure when it comes to our vehicle replacement, our mowers, our equipment for roadwork equipment, front-end loader, and also a material storage facility at the golf course. And we're investing in our people. So we're fully funding the Sheriff's Office pay plan adjustment that was directed by the commission at last week's meeting. We're also fully funding the prosecutor's office restructuring of positions and also including 8% for other department personnel and certainly funding technical training and supervisor training across the organization. And with that, I will turn it back over to the commissioner for the public hearing.
We now come to the public hearing part of this. We will obviously, third and fourth items on our regular agenda, we will take up the budget and then be discussing it among ourselves. But right now, we will move into the public meeting part of this. So with that, I'd like to call to order the public meeting on the 2023 budget for Clay County. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment? Is there anyone who would like to comment? Are there any members of the public who would care to comment on the 2023 budget? Seeing none, the public comment section of the proposed budget is ended. That brings us to immediate action. Administrator?
Thank you, Commissioner. There are 3 items before you for immediate action this evening. The first is the commission meeting minutes for December 14th at 6 p.m. and minutes from the December 21st, 3 o'clock meeting. Also, Resolution 2023-29 is approval of invoices for the period of January 13th through January 19th. There were 124 invoices totaling $650,397.83. And also Resolution 2023-30, which is approving ARPA funding for the chiller replacement for the administration building that was discussed and presented to the commission last week in an amount not to exceed $355,000.
Are there any questions or comments for the administrator? Seeing none, is there a motion related to the immediate action agenda before us?
Yes, I move to approve commission meeting minutes for December 14th, 2022 and December 21st, 2022, as well as 2023-29 and 2023-30.
Motion has been made for the approval of the 3 items on this evening's immediate action agenda. Discussion? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner,
Aye.
Commissioner Withington,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
That brings us to our regular agenda. First item on that agenda is 2023-13. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-13 is consideration of a request for the waiver of fees, interest, penalties, and taxes on property owned by Nikki Ritter. The applicant was here last week and presented information to the commission. This is a request for the 2022 assessment year, and the contested amount being requested for consideration totals $333.61.
Very well. Are there any questions of the commission of the administrator before we go to the applicant? Okay, if the applicant would, and again, on any of these kind of things, the applicant, if that person is here, certainly welcome to speak and give us some information on this. As with any citizen making a request, it's not required that you speak before the commission, but if you'd like to give us some information that we might find helpful in considering this matter, we'd certainly be more than happy to hear what you have to say. Would the applicant like to speak on this matter? I'm sorry, I don't recognize who that person is.
I don't have anything additional to add.
Okay. Knowing that the applicant is here, if questions are raised, then we can ask her if she would care to address those. One bit of housekeeping before we get much further, and that is, I should have mentioned this at the outset, but those wishing to address the commission, please come up to the podium. Make sure that the light is green at the base of the microphone, and please identify yourself for the audio recordings, and then proceed with your comments. With that, I believe Commissioner Withington would like to address this issue?
Yeah, I just want to make a motion that we, it is on, can you hear me?
No. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to make a
we go.
motion that we check the box approve and that we refund Ms. Ritter $333.61.
Motion's been made to approve 2023-13 with the box indicating approved, checked. That brings us to discussion, and I think, yes, would anybody from staff would like to address this issue?
I can. Barbara Riley, collector. I feel it shouldn't be approved. There were indications that there were insufficient funds in the account at the time,
Okay.
the withdrawal from our, so I feel that they were insufficient funds at that time.
Okay. And is there a recommendation from staff on on how we dispose of this issue?
I reckon, I don't think we should refund it. I think it's a
Okay.
policy, unless there was an error on the part of the collector's office, and I don't feel there was.
Right, according to state statute, to refund those monies, we would be required to say that the county had made some error. And if I remember correctly, on the form that is filled out, it has a place where you check which
Yes.
error you feel that the county had made. And on this application, I'm sorry, I don't have it, I didn't quite get it pulled up in front of me. Is there let me come down here a little bit further. I wanted to review that. I kind of went down here kind of fast. Is there an the paperwork on that? There we are. And it says electronic payment error.
It was insufficient funds.
Excuse me?
It was insufficient funds.
Right, but these boxes are to be checked if there is an error on the part of the county. And if there was an electronic payment error on the part of the county, that would be appropriate. Am I correct on that? And there is no electronic error on the part of the county.
That's correct.
Okay.
And Commissioner, maybe this would be a good time for me to jump in for just a second.
Yes, please go right ahead.
We have multiple new commissioners, and I think this might be the first one of these that this commission has seen.
Could you speak just a little louder?
Is it, am I registering? Okay. Generally speaking, the statutes that govern these allow for a refund in situations where the county has made an error or an omission. Not just general, seems fair, or the right thing to do. There needs to be some connection back to a mistake or an error made by the county. And so that's just trying to give you, for the new commissioners, a general overview of what your role is when we see one of these come up, because obviously we have 2 tonight, and I think we have a couple more on their way.
If I remember correctly, I think that the parts of a state statute that deal with Chapter 52 and Chapter 139, I think I pulled them up here, but in any case, they're on the page here as well. Yeah, 139.
I'm sorry, 52,
Yes.
230, and 52, 240, I believe.
Right, and the Chapter 52 is altered with Senate Bill 711 back in 2008. I worked on that issue. The issue at the time was that the county had in fact made an error on the taxpayer's bill. The county acknowledged that error. However, in accordance with state law, we were unable to refund that money because we did not have the enabling legislation. Tell you the truth, it was something I worked on along with some other people, and it ended up in that Senate bill. And what that said was that the county could, in fact, refund penalties and interest in the case that it was an error on the part of the county. Apart from that, there was no other authorization to allow us to take this action to refund, with the exception of that. And that, of course, reflected in the page here, in the application. It makes reference to those places in state law. So something that I think we need to be thinking about too is, And I don't know, maybe the administrator knows, but I'm trying to think of where the, I thought that the penalty money went to the county and not to the taxing jurisdictions, or am I wrong on that?
Yes. Yes.
It goes to the taxing jurisdictions?
No, the
Goes
county.
to, yeah, I thought it went into the tax maintenance fund, is that? Yeah,
Some
that's
of
what I
it,
thought.
portion of it.
Yes, Commissioner Lawson.
So, I mean, I don't know. Humanity has to come into something once in a damn while. On this, it said that unknown to her, her bank had removed the overdraft protection on her checking. Now, I realize that's not the county's fault, but isn't there some kind of hardship or something that, why not have told the woman that last week instead of making her come back again and have to go through all this again only to tell her, sorry, you can't get it. I just wonder if there isn't something that would allow us, with some mistakes that have been made, not on our part, but nevertheless to remove that penalty. I'm just asking.
Two reasons. One would be because it gave a chance to do research, and although I was somewhat remembering it, 2008 was a long time ago, so I wanted to make sure that I reviewed that particular piece of law. And as far as whether there is a hardship exemption, right now my understanding is Representative Ritchie from Kearney is putting legislation forth on that issue to allow for that. That has, I believe, just been assigned to committee. If that should go through, absent an emergency clause, that would then take effect in August of this year, at the end of August. So there is no authorization for us in state law to be able to do that outside of the parameters that we just listed. So that's kind of where we are. I didn't want to, because one of the reasons I did not want to say too much about it the last time was I wanted to be sure of my facts before I said, no, I don't think it's applicable, and then turn out that I would be wrong. I wanted to verify my information, because it would be, a terrible thing to say, no, you don't get it, and then realize that I'd made an error before I'd done my research. Further discussion, Commissioner Johnson.
So I just want to confirm, maybe with County Council, that if it's not a mistake on the county's part, we cannot refund anything. Is that correct?
That's my reading of the statutes. Now, that doesn't limit, the taxpayer's ability to have recourse against their banks, for example, in this situation, if they think the bank made a mistake.
Right, that'd be with the bank.
But the authorization the
Right.
statutes currently give to the county are only in situations where there's a county error or omission.
I just want to go on record saying that this is one of the reasons why people hate government. This is so ridiculous. It's so inefficient, and it's nobody's fault here, but I want to make it known, I do not like that at all. I had this exact same situation. You could change the date and put my name in here. This exact same thing happened to me, except it wasn't with my property taxes, it was with my credit card. And what I did is I called my bank, said, hey, here's the mistake, this is what happened. Their response was, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. We appreciate you as a valued customer. We'll take these fees off right away. We thank you for your business, and treated me like I was special, which is what we should be doing to people like Miss, is it Ritter? Am I saying that right? Yeah, Miss Ritter, right? Which is, and other people, I mean, she's paying thousands of dollars in taxes to us, and there was an honest mistake. She wasn't trying to avoid anything. She was trying to pay it. There's an honest mistake that happened. That's happened to me. It's probably happened to a lot of other people with electronic banking. And here she's going to get penalized for it. She's, a couple days late. I mean, the first and the second were holidays anyway. She paid it on the, 4th or the 5th, something like that. I just think this is absolutely, I don't know if I can say asinine here or not, but that's what I think about this when it comes to government. It's like we should be treating people like they're our customers, and we should be trying to, there's a motto I had, an overarching goal I had when I was a department head, and that is we should be trying to create raving fans out of every contact. We should be trying to make raving fans out of these people that we serve. Not, hey, how can we screw them over with another fee or penalty or anything for something that was just an honest mistake. And again, I know it's nobody's fault here, but we can either be part of the solution or part of the problem. And I think this has to change. This really upsets me And if you read further on, she has a lot of other issues that she's dealing with, that she doesn't need this extra stuff thrown on top of us. And that process is ridiculous. It's ridiculous that I made a phone call to the bank and it was done in 5 minutes with an apology. Here this is going on 3 weeks now. All this information was before us last week, as well as her testimony and her here last week. And then and we don't do anything with it, and we have to come back. And I know Commissioner Nolte said, he wanted to double check on the law, and I appreciate that. But the fact that this is the process we put her through just to tell her, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it, I think it's ridiculous. And this is why people don't like government. We got to change that. We got to stop this nonsense. That's ridiculous. And I will tell you, just like my bank told me, I will tell Ms. Ritter, I apologize. I apologize you have to go through it. And I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that this is how we handle this kind of thing. I think you should have your money back. It was an honest mistake. I appreciate that you pay taxes year in and year out on time, and that you pay our salaries. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry that there's not more I could do about this, because I certainly would if I could. But this just infuriates me. I think that's the problem with government.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you very much, and I will echo my colleagues' apology, and I'm sorry you've had to come here to get this news. But anytime there's a negative, where's the opportunity to find some positives? And I think we're talking about that hopefully at the state. But I do have a question on how we handle our business, because it does strike me that basically for 5 days between fees, penalties, and interest, it's about 10% more that we are asking Ms. Ritter to pay. And of course, many of these things are governed by the state. We all understand that, and we're getting that reviewed tonight. But I am curious as to what drives the penalty amount, and what recourse or ability do we have at the county to drive those penalty amounts, if any?
Right. By state law, it's the last day of the month of December. We extended it, you all extended it because of our issue with the postage, and that until the 3rd. And we program our computer that anything after midnight on the 3rd or the day that was set will have penalty and interest.
So, but what's that schedule? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand, because my assumption would be if she had paid today as opposed to the 5th, that penalty schedule may be a little bit different. So I'm trying to understand.
It's on a
what that
monthly
is.
basis. It's at the beginning of each month. At the end of each month, the computer is set up to charge at midnight the next day.
But those penalties, and where I'm trying to understand is
9.5 and
where do we have purview as far as what that penalty schedule is? And so my question is really, if we wanted to say down the road, because of issues like these that come up, that we would prefer that the amount of penalties is not whatever gets you to $265, but something else. What drives that penalty
The state
schedule
law.
and the amounts?
the state law.
Okay, so the state law says here is your penalty and here is
We
your
have a-
schedule.
Yeah, I don't know the actual state statute
Well,
number
and that's
or
fine.
anything like that, but there is a state statute. Some counties, I believe, don't do it the way that we do. Our system is set up and has been set up for years that way. There would be, I'm sure, a lot of cost. If we changed it, we could probably do that. We'd need to know ahead of time, of course.
Sure, yeah.
But this is state law, and this is the way it was set up way back when.
No, I understand that. I'm
Right,
just trying to meld this issue
Right,
that we have with
right.
with the sentiment that's been expressed by our colleague to understand, as we look to next year, because obviously we can't go back, but as we look towards next year, if that is something that this commission wants to take up, where is our purview to do that? Or do we have to hope that Representative Ritchie is successful in whatever he's working on? So that's what I'm trying to get to, and I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
And by the way, the property tax issue in general is being taken up on a number of issues. So for those of you unfamiliar with the workings, obviously Commissioner Carpenter is quite familiar. But just because there's one bill going does not mean that it cannot be tapped onto another bill as an amendment. So the idea of property taxes are being taken up. Hopefully they will address this issue. I think one thing we could do would be to express our support for Representative Ritchie. Keep promoting him. And come up with what we can do to support that effort in Jefferson City. But like I said, I wanted to check what the actual state of the law was. Prior to 2008, even if the county had made the mistake, we were prohibited by law from refunding that. So even in a case where we were at fault, that was what animated us to making that change in law, which was certainly a step in the right direction, but we can always consider more steps. Further discussion?
Yeah, Jerry.
Commissioner Withington.
So going forward, can we stop this so somebody doesn't have to come back 2 weeks in a row if we're just going to ultimately end up voting no?
Well, now that we
Or not be able to do it?
Yeah, now that because like I said, one of the reasons I wanted to double check, because that is the law as I remember it, but I wanted to make sure that subsequent laws had not been passed in the interim that might prove me incorrect in my interpretation of it. Yeah, and in fact, it is kind of spelled out here on the form, but I think we do need to make sure that, to the degree we can, to indicate, and maybe on the, I think it is, in fact, on the form. I printed out the page from the county website, and it says it's got a box in it, and I think this is page 2 when you go to the website where it's got the form. This form may only be used in cases where the county office made an error in the calculation of your taxes. And then below that, it says, do not use this appeal for any of the following reasons, and it's got 5 little bullet points down there. Whether we can enhance that a little bit or not, I don't know. But it does, say so there, and it does, on the application form at the very top, it does say request for waiver of fees, interest, penalties, and taxes due to county error. So it does say that in a couple of places. But yeah, I mean, sometimes the interpretation of that is a little bit more wide than it is in this particular case. I can see where a taxpayer might think, well, maybe I do qualify after all, and what's it hurt to apply? But yeah, I think what I'm picking up on is we are kind of where we are on that one. But I'm interested to hear any opinions to the contrary that allow us a path to do that. Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Well, I will double down a little bit on my colleague's earlier comments, because it strikes me that these sorts of requests should run through the gatekeeper before it comes to us. To have it come in front of us suggests that there is latitude for a decision to be made by the legislative body. Clearly, it is not. And so I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, because then they'll all gang up on me and throw me under the bus. But I will just simply point out that if this is to go to someone, whoever that someone is, to make the determination that this is appropriate to move forward to the commission, then by all means do so. But I think for the newbies, my expectation is staff only brings things like this when it is for us to decide. To have it come otherwise is a little strange to me, and puts us in some bad positions and puts individuals in bad positions. And so that's all part of that that customer service that was referred to earlier. And so my request for the administrator and the county counselor is to simply, please look at this before it comes to us, because we just spent 20 minutes on something we can't do anything about. And again, I apologize that you're going through that, and I'll go ahead and apologize to Ms. Baharain. Is that a little bit different? Okay, I'm hoping so, because I feel bad for the person that's now had to sit here through this, and I just hope that The stuff we get is the stuff that we can speak to. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
And Commissioner, if I may address that point, it is our reading of this statute that it has to go to the county commission. There is no ability for for staff to resolve these short of the county commission. The statute seems to be, to my reading, very clear that the county commission has to make a decision to approve or disapprove.
If that is the case, then I think it has to be very clear when it does come that this is state statute, this is what you can do and can't do. I mean, I must admit, it's pretty odd that state statute says you got to take a look at this county commission even though you can't do anything with it, because then what's the point of that? So if it must be that way, then I think it has to be very clear in the presentation that this can't be done and make someone now visit us for 2 weeks only to get bad news at the end of it. So if we can, if we can manipulate that process a bit, even if it is just the addition of here is the recommendation and why, I know it would be helpful for me.
Okay.
So,
Perhaps if consulting with staff, if you have some recommendation of how that can be finessed a little bit and still keep us compliant with state law.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, the way I read the statute, I think the taxpayer is entitled to have their petition, their application heard by the county commission. I mean, we could certainly be a little more, I don't want to say forceful, but at least more open to the taxpayer that we don't believe this is one that fits within that parameter to see if they still want to move forward. But I'm always somewhat reluctant to try to try to talk a taxpayer into disengaging with their government. It's an odd statute.
Yeah.
I think it says you may only do it for these reasons, but you're also entitled to a decision from the county commission.
Well, and the thing is, perhaps during the process of putting the application together, if the taxpayer would advise, well, this doesn't really quite fit the category, but I also see the point of view to where if we start filtering them out prior to, even though it's for the convenience of the taxpayer, that could be construed as discouraging a taxpayer coming before the commission with a redress of their grievance. I can even envision a situation where a citizen might come forward understanding that they might not prevail, but just because they want to make the point that they feel that the law should be changed. So I can easily see that as being another option that a taxpayer may or may want to avail themselves of. So, yeah, I think one of the things that we try to be sensitive of is allowing any citizen, any taxpayer, to be entitled to their time before the commission. But it's a little bit of a tightrope to walk, but certainly it's something that we might want to revisit and see if there is some way that we can advise a citizen without coming off as though we're trying to short circuit their ability to come before the commission and make their case. Any further discussion? Commissioner Withington, are you still wanting to go you can either go forward and close on your motion, or you can withdraw it, whichever is convenient.
So you guys
for
are saying I can't move forward with my motion, right?
Excuse me?
So my motion was to approve her refund. But
That
you
is
guys are
correct.
now telling me we can't do that, right?
The thing is, I'm not telling you you've got to withdraw, but Mr. Counselor, can you give us a little advice on this? Because it seems as though we would be making a motion that would be contrary to state statute, and I kind of hate to shut someone down from making a motion. I would really feel more comfortable getting the legal opinion, because if we were to go forward, it may result in obviously a negative vote. If it results in a positive vote, that puts us in kind of an odd position as well. Can you give us some thoughts on that?
Sure. Again, the state statute requires that a refund can be given only in situations where there's a county error or omission. Obviously, our preference from the legal side is that the motions be made within that box, that if there's an error or omission, that's when the motion comes in. I'm certainly not going to tell any commissioner what motions they can and cannot make, short of, I guess, a process issue. This matter is before the commission. You're free to make the motion you wish, but from our standpoint, a positive vote on this matter should be made when there is an evidence of an error or omission by the county.
And that was really where my question was, if it would still be a proper motion, and since it would be in conflict with with state statute. One last process question, just to make sure. So should this go forward to a vote, the vote fails to achieve a majority, we still would need to take it up and have another vote on the negative, is that correct?
That would be my preference. Again, the statute's written in the way of saying it shall be approved or disapproved. I mean, I can make the argument that the failure to approve it is in fact a disapproval, but historically what we've done is a motion to either approve it or a motion to disapprove is what we've done.
Right. So we couldn't just not approve to pass it and figure, I mean, we could, but really this statute calls for us to either say yes or no, not kind of punt, so to speak.
That's correct.
Very well. Yes, I was going to Commissioner Withington to close, but would you mind if I go to Commissioner Lawson?
Okay.
Commissioner Lawson.
Here's my question to you, I guess. So I know how he feels, because I feel the same way. It just breaks my heart. But if he goes ahead with his motion, and he votes yes, return the money, I vote yes, return the money, Jay votes yes, and maybe somebody else does as well, are we breaking the law? Are they going to give her back her money, or is it a wasted motion and more frustration for her?
Whether it's an actual violation or it's just in conflict with state statute, Mr. Counselor, that gets a little bit beyond my abilities. And I know you're smiling because I always push you the hard questions onto you.
If the county commission votes to approve, I think staff's position is we will honor that vote. Now, that doesn't mean that someone who believes that vote to be an error could not challenge it. And that would be probably where we would be subject to some attack on the inability to actually approve this resolution.
Okay.
But we will, my position would be that we would go forward with honoring the vote of this commission.
Right, because obviously it's not the position of staff to second-guess votes of the commission, but to carry those instructions out. So, okay. Is there anyone else before I go back to Commissioner Withington? Commissioner Withington.
I'm going to keep my motion to keep the box checked approved.
Okay.
And with that, I close.
Very good, thank you. I should have mentioned that you're recognized to close as well. With that, please call the roll.
Commissioner Withington,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Wagner,
No.
Commissioner Carpenter,
No.
Commissioner Thompson,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Nolte,
No. So that brings us to so what the counselor suggests is, since that failed, is that there be a motion to vote to check the no box.
Yes, check the deny box.
Anybody want to make that motion? Commissioner Wagner.
Reluctantly, I move to deny the request made under 2023-13.
Motion's been made for the passage of 2023-13 with the box indicating no checked. Further discussion? Seeing none, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner,
Aye.
Commissioner Withington,
No.
Commissioner Lawson,
No.
Commissioner Carpenter,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
No. Also, could you say that again? I didn't quite. You said no?
No.
Very good.
Commissioner Nolte.
Yes. Correct. That brings us to 2023-14. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-14 is the consideration of waiving fees, interest, penalties, and taxes due on the property at 5628 North Myrtle Avenue, Gladstone, Missouri, for 2021 assessment year, and the amount contested is $709.29.
Commissioners, if I may, since
Yes.
listening to the last conversation, I guess maybe I could just start and say that my reading of 2023-14, that the taxpayer, at a minimum, alleges a county error or omission. So I just want to throw that out there, to me, that allegation is included in the petition.
That's correct. The application has the box under Section 4 marked as Other, and please see attached document. So that, in this case, there is the case to be made that there was an error on the part of the county. Would the applicant like to come forward and discuss this application? Is the applicant present here this evening?
I'm not sure that the applicant is here. The applicant was not here last week either.
Okay.
But
Please go ahead,
Collector O'Reilly
Administrator.
would be happy to provide information for the commission.
Yeah, if you or the collector, either one. So yes, whoever from staff would like to address this, please go forward.
Barbara O'Reilly, collector. Our reports indicated that the stub for the real estate was sent and the payment for the personal property was sent. In posting it the next day, we have a report that shows it, that these two figures did not match. We would have voided the payment to the real estate and posted it. We would investigate it and found that it was due to the personal property tax. We would have posted to that. We would have sent them a new statement showing that the real estate was not paid and that the personal property was paid. And I checked the records and there was never anything returned to us. And with speaking with them, I believe the other check for the real estate had never cleared the bank.
Okay. And is that and I hesitate to have, we've got the document in front of us. So the error alleged by the county is, could you go ahead and just restate what, I realize it's kind of awkward, putting forward someone else's point, but could you go ahead and summarize that?
Excuse me. We only received the one check for the personal property, and we never received the other check. It was not in the envelope they supposed sent. If they sent two envelopes, the other envelope did not get to our office, to the bank.
So if I'm interpreting this correctly, the alleged error on the part of the county was that the taxpayer indicates that they had both checks in the envelope, and yet, so they would, I guess what they are thinking is that we somehow lost the other check in the envelope. Is that kind of where they're going with that?
That's what I'm thinking they think, yes. And
Okay.
there's no indication that it was, because this would have been sent to the bank to process.
Okay.
And Commissioners, there's a section of the narrative statement by the taxpayer that at least tries to give some voice to what they believe happened. I'm happy to read it for everyone if you'd like, or maybe, I assume it's in your packet. So it's the paragraph that begins, "What I suspect happened," is kind of where I think the taxpayer is trying to articulate what they believe happened that was a county error.
Okay. Questions from the commission? Commissioner Johnson.
A couple things. First, according to the petitioner here, or whatever you call it, they've lived here for 35 years and have paid their taxes on time every year. Do you have anything to conflict that?
I did not check that.
Okay. And then I also see that, and this kind of goes along with what Commissioner Wagner was talking about, and that is, I see the bill, the tax amount was for $2,400, but then they have interest, almost $440 in interest on that, another $260 in penalties and fees, $270 penalties and fees. What interest rate do we charge? Does the county charge?
It's 9.5%, and then the penalty is 1.5%.
9.5% interest rate?
This is also 2 years past due. This was 21 bill, and it wasn't paid until 23.
It was paid 12/22, from what I'm seeing.
Was it 22? But it was like the 21 bill that hadn't been.
Right. So we're looking about 12 months late, yeah.
12 months old.
Okay. No questions.
Questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Well, I do note, and maybe this is where my colleague was going, as she writes in here, she did not have a non-payment notice, so as far as she was concerned, she paid it, and it was only several months later that she was aware that she had not. But I think I may know the answer to this. So we only cashed, the county only cashed the one check, but not the second. Is
Yes,
that
correct,
correct? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Further comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner Wagner.
Sorry. Perhaps a question for the administrator or the county counselor. It does strike me as odd that our petitioner is not here this week and was not here last week. One of the things that does strike me is when a check hasn't been cashed for multiple months, I start asking, well, why wasn't that cashed? I see by your nod, you're probably asking yourself the same question. But that's not a question to ask staff, that is a question for the petitioner. So my question is there anything that would preclude us? I know I can see by everyone's face, we enjoy talking about this particular subject, but it does make me wonder, does this require action today, and can it be held over to a future meeting when the petitioner can come?
That is actually another odd element of this statute. It
I'm beginning to
requires-
love Missouri statutes even more than I used to. So,
It requires action by the county commission within 30 days.
okay.
And without looking, I don't know the application date on this. Almost always, that's very quick, and we have to do it very quickly.
Then my secondary question would be, if we were to, once action is taken by the commission, is there a further recourse to reapply, or can they reapply? Or if we were to decide, for example, due to time, no, we are not going to take, or we are going to disprove that, does she have recourse to come back and request it again? Under the guise of I've got new information or
That's
something like that?
a really interesting question. There is no prohibition in the statute that would limit an applicant to only one application. So my first response would be, if we were to deny it and additional evidence were to appear, I don't think the taxpayer would be precluded from taking another run at it.
I see.
Mr. Counselor, I have an additional question to sort of follow up on Commissioner Wagner's question, and that is this. So if we were to consider this tonight, make a vote, and just say for the sake of argument it was a split vote, some yeses, some noes, would it not be in order, if additional information were to come forward, that and say it were to be denied, that a member who had voted for the denial could, in fact, at the next meeting, make a motion to reconsider?
That's 100% correct. Any member voting in the affirmative on a matter could vote to reconsider at the next meeting. That's correct. So if additional information appeared, that would absolutely be appropriate.
So here's what I'm kind of thinking about is that we take it up and, should there be a motion to deny it, go through that motion if we could prevail upon staff to reach out to this person and let them know that they're denied, but, if they have additional information, we could hear it. I'm not sure I want to go quite to that. I'm not sure exactly going to that extent because I hesitate to chase someone down who is not able to attend, but at least at that point, we could walk it back in a relatively short order without going through the additional process of appealing. Related to that, the only other question I would have from staff is, has there been staff is always very good about giving us the entire communication that they have with any constituent. Is there any other communication, and I rather doubt there is, but is there any other communication that we should consider at this time?
No, none that I'm aware of, and I defer to Collector Riley, but I don't believe we've had any additional communication from the applicant.
I have a question, Jerry.
Commissioner Johnson.
So if this happened, in fact, how she said it happened, she turned in 2 checks, One of them got cash, one of them apparently was lost somewhere according to her. Would there be any would she be noticed at all that, hey, you didn't pay this bill?
We would have sent another statement.
Oh, could you speak into the microphone?
Oh, sorry, yes, sir, we would send another statement, and then a delinquent would have been sent when we did the delinquent notices.
And do you know if those were sent to her?
I didn't check, I can't prove anything, we put it in the mail, I can't prove anything. I did notice that nothing has come back. And all the mail that comes back, we do scan it and image it, and it goes into their account, so you can see if anything come back, so
Okay, so I
unless
noticed in
it's
here that
lost in the mail.
I noticed that she said that she received a payment verification document from Clay County Collector. But I guess she didn't look close enough, and I guess that just was for the personal property tax and not the other. Here's my thought. This person has been paying tax in this county for 35 years on time, and nobody has said anything differently to that. In my mind, she's a good customer. I don't like this kind of stuff. I think it's ridiculous. And so with that, I'm going to make the motion. I move that we approve, check this box approved, and approve 2023-14.
Very well. Motion has been made. Discussion. Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. I follow the sentiment of the motion, but I want to see her. If she's going to petition, I would like her to explain why she didn't notice it, why she only figured it out 10 months later. And I know that's asking for another hoop. I get it. But the taxpayer has an obligation just as much as we do. And I'd like to at least hear the story, or even if it's in written form, to understand it. So
Have you not read her letter that she submitted?
I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it. And what I would say is, if she's receiving something that says this is what's been paid, and she notices that it's wrong or that something's missing and hasn't asked why, or if she has figured out many months later that something is wrong, I'm trying to understand why this wasn't found earlier, or why she has not brought it up earlier. And there could be a very good reason for that. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just saying I'd like to hear it.
I think she explains that in the letter. It says, we received the following two bills in December 2021 for personal property taxes in the amount and real estate taxes. I wrote two checks, and by the way, she has a copy of both those checks that she attached, and mailed both with payment, and I know you're seeing this, I'm letting everybody else hear this, payment vouchers for these taxes. You can see the carbon copy for check 183, which was the more expensive one that she apparently didn't pay, and check 184, the second check, later in sequential order, for the 190, both made to Clay County Collector. I received a payment verification document from Clay County Collector and filed it with our 2021 tax paperwork, but did not look closely since I did not anticipate any issues. In reality, the receipt was only for the personal property taxes. There was no further communication from the county until I received the bill in 2022 property taxes. To my surprise, there was an outstanding balance for the 2021 real estate taxes, along with the $439.80 interest, $259.49 penalty, and a $10 clerk cost for a total of $709.29. I checked my bank account and noticed that the check number 183 for the real estate taxes had never cleared the bank, but the check 184 for personal property taxes had cleared. To me, I don't know if there's any more explanation she can give than that, and that's why I'll just leave it at that. I'm fine with approving this.
My only thinking is that we're all required to look at how we've paid and what we've paid for, and where I would see where we may be at issue, and kind of going back to the county councilor's earlier comments, is if if what we are to do is to communicate with the taxpayer that we have not been paid, and there is a part of that process that we did not do that we would do with any other taxpayer, then this is a slam dunk as far as I'm concerned. And that it is correct to compensate this individual. If, on the other hand, we did, and this individual either lost it, forgot about it, didn't take it into consideration, well, at that point then I've got to say, well, look, we did what we would have done. Now it's on to the taxpayer. That is their burden. So for me, it's a matter of understanding, did we do for her what we would have done for anyone else? And I heard a little bit earlier that, well, you know, we haven't checked, but I'm assuming that our systems can spit that out. And so that's the burden I will put on us, that if we didn't do what we're supposed to do, then it's on us. And we will gladly pay this.
I'd agree with that, but the burden would be on us to prove that. She's saying she never got anything. And do we have any records that shows that we sent her delinquent notices?
It would be in with our delinquent notice process that we sent to the processing company, the printers.
Yeah, so she's saying she hasn't seen or heard anything of it. And again, I'm going to go back to 35 years and always paid her tax on time. I'm sure she probably did it the same way every time. She has two carbon copies of the checks she sent in. Obviously, something happened to those checks that probably weren't her fault. Whether this isn't somebody who's trying to avoid paying taxes.
Right.
This is a good customer. And if I call my bank doesn't say, I need you to show up, I need to see your face, I need you to tell me in public. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, for the inconvenience. We'll fix this right away. That's what we need to do. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Somebody messed up. Maybe nobody did anything on purpose, but there were 2 checks sent, unless she's completely making this up online and making carbon copies and that kind of stuff. And I surely wouldn't want to go down that road.
Well,
so my thought is, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Commissioner.
And I have no issue with anyone who has been a good paying customer of the county. The question in my mind is not, did someone who has been great make a mistake? So there's somewhere a mistake, absolutely. The question that unfortunately needs to be asked is, who made that mistake? Did we do what we were supposed to do? If we did not, then that fault is ours and we need to compensate. There are lots of good paying tax customers in Clay County, Missouri. I'm one of them, and everyone I think in this room is one of them. We are expected to do what we are supposed to do, and if we do it, then there's no issue. When the problem arises, the question becomes one of who was at fault, who didn't do their part. Because if we say to everyone, you know, you made a mistake, and we're going to be like that bank, we're going to just make it better, well, okay, but we're not built to do that yet. Which is, again, the question I ask of, well, if we can at least figure out for sure it's our mistake because we didn't report correctly, great. If, on the other hand, we have done what we would do with every other tax customer, then the question really becomes, are we only doing this because we want to help this person? And if the answer, yes, that's the only reason why we would do it, then everyone line up, because what we're saying is, even if we do everything we're supposed to do, if you made the mistake, we're still going to help you out. And we don't have the means to do that yet. And that's my only concern, is I want to be certain of where the issue lies. And if it's us.
So what mistake do you think she made?
Well, I mean, the question really is like anyone else who's a taxpayer. When I send a check into something, do I see on my statement it's been cashed? If I get a notice, do I respond to that notice? And that's, to me, where the question is, was the notice sent? Can we prove that the notice has been sent?
But before the notice, if in fact she did send in the 2 checks like she did, and she shows the carbon copies of them, and it's now on the county, right? So somebody at the county either mishandled that check or in the mail or something happened that was mishandled in some way. That's not her fault.
No.
And that's exactly what this form is for, that we talked about earlier, is, hey, is there a mistake somewhere on the, and I'm not putting blame on anybody
Right.
in our office here, but those things happen.
But the question becomes, could you have known what I interpret as 6 months in advance, when you get your statement from your bank and it shows, well, this one was cash, but this one wasn't. Well, why wasn't it cash? So I get that, yeah, you send your check in, you expect the county to deal with it, and no problem. But my concern is, and I don't mean to belabor it, is just simply one of, did this taxpayer do what should have been expected of any taxpayer? And that is, when I sent my check, yeah, I can see that it's been cashed. And if the answer is, I don't see it, I should be calling the county. And if now she's waited, I mean, and the fees are racking up, did we tell her we didn't get it? And in my mind, that's where I get to, if we did what we would have done for any taxpayer, and we can show we did that, then it is harder for me to say, yeah, there's a mistake here, but does it fall under what statute allows us to do?
See, that's where I disagree. I think when she sends her check into us, into the county, she did her job. I don't think we need to put the burden on her to follow up, make sure we got her check, make sure we cash her check. I don't think we need to put that burden. Certainly I do that, and it sounds like you do that, and I'm gonna follow up. She didn't. She's been doing this the same way, it sounds like, for 35 years and never had an issue. And now all of a sudden we're saying, listen, you sent your check in, but because for some reason we didn't get it, we didn't cash it, we lost it, whatever, it's your fault for not following up with us. She said she was never notified until she got her last, and unless we're gonna say that she's not telling the truth. She said that she was not notified until she got her next year's bill that she was delinquent. So based on all the information she's given us, my motion stands. That's just
No,
where
I got
I'm at
it.
with that.
But let me say, yeah, I'm coming to you, but the thing is, we do have to make a determination. The determination required that is put upon us by state law is to say, we will refund this because it is a county error. Can you prove it was a county error? I mean, I make mistakes. She might have made a mistake. Our staff may have made a mistake. But there is no compelling evidence that the mistake was on the part of the county. And furthermore, while I'm sure my wife would prefer I was a little bit more diligent in looking over the checkbook, if I ended up with this amount of money over what I thought I had, it would catch my attention. And I would have probably followed up and said, did you guys get my check? And also, I'm glad to hear your experience with your bank, but I don't know. If you make that kind of mistake with your mortgage company, they're not all that understanding sometimes on those things. So and the final point that I'd like to make is the reason that we have our commission meeting staggered 3 o'clock and 6 p.m. is to give taxpayers the maximum amount of ability to come before the commission and air their grievances. Now, there may be a perfectly legitimate reason that this citizen, has not come before us. But if I had that kind of money that I was looking at, I'd make a point of being here. Now, there may be a good reason why she has not been able to make it. If this were you, would you be up here saying, hey, you guys made an error. I think I'm positive I sent that in, and you need to do this. Would you? And again, I don't mean to assign motives, but if it were me and I were in this situation, I'd be up here, especially with the option of, I get the fact that a person would work and not make a 3 p.m. meeting, but that's the point of having the staggered meetings we have, is so citizens have the maximum ability to access their government and to express, because I would like to ask her questions about that.
I'll tell you, Commissioner, if I was 95 years old, I would just send it in a letter. I wouldn't show up here.
Really?
Yeah. This is too late, too much on somebody who's 95 years old.
Is she 95? You see, now that's why I'm asking. Is she 95?
I have no idea, but we don't know that, do we? We have no reason, we have no idea why she's not here, do we?
And
We
you
can't
have
make
no-
assumption. And you also said that she hasn't the burden about showing that there's some fault on the part of the county, I think that's exactly what she laid out. She laid out, hey, this is what I did. She gave us copies, carbon copies of her checks that she sent. And in the sequential order, the second one was cashed by the, and it sounds like they might have first been applied to, well, let me tell you what she suspects happened. What I suspect happened here is that whoever opened our envelope with payments paired the wrong check with the wrong payment voucher. Check 184 with real estate voucher was processed first. They voided the voucher and applied the payment to personal property tax bill. Next, they tried to process check 183 with the personal property tax voucher, but they realized that the bill was already paid since check 184 was already applied to that amount. At this point, they simply discarded check 183 and did not do any further investigation as to what other bill it could be applied to. Now, whether that's what happened, I can't imagine just discarding a check, but nonetheless, this person has laid out their argument. I don't know what else they could say in front of us that would change anything. And to say that they haven't put up any kind of evidence to show any neglect or any fault of ours is just wrong. It's all right there in that letter. And
The thing is-
including, she supplied 2 copies, carbon copies of the check sheet. I would like to see supplied to us copies of the letters that we sent saying that she was delinquent, even though that doesn't matter because delinquent was still, if she was delinquent, it looks like it could have been the county's fault that she was delinquent, so that doesn't matter to me either. But the fact is, she's put some evidence together here, presented in a letter with some attachments as well. This is all evidence to show that there may be some fault on the part of the county.
There may be some
Which is exactly
fault.
what we need to approve this.
That's the point. There may be some fault. The thing is, your motion, and whatever motion we entertain, is going to assign fault. That's what's laid upon us by the state statute. We are going to have to come down and say, in our opinion, it is either the fault of the county or it is an error on the part of the person sending in the taxes, assuming they did not make an error. So you can't really say you don't know, because by making that motion, you are saying that is my belief. What you're saying with that motion is you believe the county is at fault.
I think she's proven a case, yes.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure that you're clear on that, because you can't say that, yeah, I don't know what's going on. If you make that motion, you are in fact, in making the allegation that the county is in error and that it should be refunded. I'm sorry, Commissioner Lawson, I didn't take a chance to get back to you, and I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Just one quick thing. I think Jay is perfectly correct. And here's the reason why. If I was going to make this story up about paying the bill, and it's now 6 months later or whatever it is, how am I going to be smart enough to go back and find 183 and 184, perfect sequential order, and both made out to Clay County? I think that she sent both checks. I think either we lost one of the checks when we opened the package, or we misapplied, and that's what happened. But I think that there is chance for error on our part. And do we keep a copy of notices that we sent them out? And if we do, I'd like to see a copy of that. But if not, then I say, give the woman back her money.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you, and it just disappeared on me. But as I read this, the question is not, did she write 2 checks? She wrote 2 checks. I don't disagree with that. The question really is, which check did she put with which voucher, if I'm reading this correctly? So what I take from that is, what is the expectation when a voucher and check come to the office, and how are they dealt with?
We have our mail going to the bank, and the bank processes our payments. They take the stub and the check, and they take the stub and has our account number, their personal property or whatever account number on it, and then the check's applied to that. So when the bank opened that envelope, there were only 2 pieces of paper attached. There was no notes. The bank designates the notes and sends them back to us. We scan them and put them in the property account for proof of any kind of notes.
So I'm following this. She or anyone else sends something through the mail, comes here, it then gets given to the bank. The bank opens up the envelope and they say, here's a voucher and here's a check. Do these things match up? If they do, life goes on, and they tell you that's the case. If they are different, then do they then simply say?
We have a report
Okay.
that comes out after this is posted in our system, then the next day, after they send it back to us, the records, we post it into our system, and then something will stop and generate a report that tells us that these two things did not match. And then we go back and we investigate why they didn't match. And of course, at that time, we would have seen that the check was for the real estate, wasn't for the real estate, that it was for the personal property. We would have voided it, it was that exact amount, we would have applied it, then we would have sent a new statement from the real estate and the receipt for the personal property.
And so when would, from a timing standpoint, when would that have been reported? And I guess the other question I would have, sorry, I'm going to give you two for, when would that have been reported? And if a voucher would have arrived without a check, same kind of reporting procedure?
If it comes without a check, the bank sends it back, sends a check back to us and says that there was no stub attached. They didn't have any place to apply it, so we would investigate. If a check comes back to us, we investigate the name, the address, if there's a phone number, and there's usually not anymore, but if there's a phone number, we call if we can't find it. And
So I'm just trying to get to the point of understanding, because again, it kind of feels silly to go through a lot of these machinations, but what I'm trying to understand is, would she have reasonably been communicated with by the office if indeed a problem has been discovered? And what I'm hearing is the bank would have sent this back to the office, you would have then gotten that report, and then a communication would have occurred at that point.
well, we would have sent her a new statement on applying it to the correct parcel and then sending her a bill that the other one wasn't paid.
And the statement would have been sent at what point? And by that, I'm trying to gather.
The delinquent would have been in February, March, depending on, probably March when we did the delinquents then.
Okay.
And she should have received one then. And we do delinquents because of our tax sale. We do the real estate,
Oh, sure.
especially the real estate, because this is their first proof that their bill is delinquent.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions or discussion? Commissioner Withington?
Do we have a copy of the letter that we would have sent to her showing that it was delivered? Do you send those certified or anything?
Oh, no, we don't.
No.
Can't
So,
afford that.
so we don't
Sorry.
know that she did get the delinquent letter?
We don't know that.
Well, because
but
the reason I
anything-
ask is because it's almost every other year, I get somebody else's personal property sent to my house, and I've lived at my house for 16 years now. So we could have made a mistake, and she may not have received the delinquent letter. So if but we don't have any proof that it was mailed or received?
The only thing I have proof of is that we did not receive it back, because anything that we receive back, delinquent notices, or it says return to sender, sender unknown address, we scan all that in our system, and there was nothing like that in her account. So we never got a delinquent back that she didn't receive it.
So if it went to if it went to an address that she didn't live at, it's possible that somebody just threw it away. So
Possibility.
I always write, not at this address, put it back in the mailbox, but so other people might not do that. Okay.
They might.
I just wanted to see. Thanks.
I think Commissioner Withington's point is one worth making, and that is, if the applicant were here, we could ask if there was a history of incorrect mailings. absent the applicant being here, we cannot find out whether that was indeed the case. So that makes it very difficult to verify, where the error lies. Are there any further comments? Seeing none, you're recognized to close.
Close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Withington?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson? Commissioner Wagner?
No.
Commissioner Carpenter?
No.
Commissioner Thompson?
No.
Commissioner Nolte?
No. That brings us back to our original consideration of 2023-14. Is there a motion to mark the box not approved and to carry a vote on that? Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. I move to mark the box not approved for 2023-14.
Motion has been made. Discussion. Seeing none, you'll recognize to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner?
Aye.
Commissioner Withington?
No.
Commissioner Lawson?
No.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Nolte?
Yes. All right, that brings us to the main event of the evening, I guess, the budget. First on the agenda is 2023 Ordinance 1A. Administrator?
2023 Ordinance 1A is consideration of an ordinance adopting the annual budget of Clay County, Missouri for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2023 and ending on December 31st, 2023, pursuant to Section 50.525 through 50.651 of the revised statutes of Missouri, with the exceptions of all accounts associated with the operations of the Clay County Prosecutor's Office.
Very well. Yeah, are there any questions of the administrator before I seek a motion?
Okay, wait a minute, are we taking a motion to approve?
I was going to ask if there were any questions of the administrator, and then we'd make the motion, then we'd open it up for discussion and hear from whoever may want to come forward.
And this is all the budget except for the prosecutor's office?
With the exception of the prosecutor's office, this would be the entirety of the rest of the budget, yes. Motion away.
Motion away. I move to approve 2023-ORD 1A.
Motion has been made for the approval of 2023 Ordinance 1A. Discussion. Anybody like to make any comments? Commissioner Lawson.
Okay, my screen went crazy, so I can't. One of the things that concerns me, and I hope everybody understands this, I don't want to keep us here any longer than I have to, but I feel that this is something that we all talked about as candidates, that we have to be careful about the budget. It's important. That was one of the big issues everybody brought up. So the couple of things that I'm concerned about is that the other day when we approved the sheriff's increase in salary, we wouldn't have had to go through all of that stuff if we had been able to talk to the sheriff initially. And I'd like to say this in advance of anything else we do. When we get ready to do the budget next time, I strongly want to see every office holder, every department head, maybe not all at one time, but some of the commissioners, if we want to make it a legal meeting so we can all be there, anybody that wants to be there can. We hear from their lips what they want, why they want it, why it's important that they have this money. And the county commissioner, our county administrator, who's our budget person, should be there. But we should be there too, because ultimately it all comes back and falls on our back when things aren't right. So I want that to happen. I do applaud Commissioner Withington for asking our people that we make donations to come in and make their wishes known. I think that was great. Not just to make them come in, we weren't doing it for a mean reason, But that way, they can let us know, here's all the good things we've done, and here's what we're going to do with this money. And in the same way, it should be the same thing for every single office holder and every single department head. So I would really like for us to think about doing that and do it in the future. Used to do it that way. I know they did, and they didn't. I do have a question of our wonderful administrator. We had a brief conversation one day, and one of the things that I notice on our organizational chart is these administrative services officer, information technology. This is a new, kind of a new grouping, right? Okay. And along with that group, one of the things that we talked about was, and this is all predicated on how the treasurer's situation turns out, I know. But one of the things was a financial analyst. And while I think that there's probably a need for that type of thing, one of the things I mentioned to the administrator was, we have a perfectly good auditor who has the ability to do those kinds of things. And her concern was, you know, we throw all kinds of stuff at him, does he have time to do it? So I went downstairs and sat down with him and I said, okay, we're looking at this. Do you have time to do that? And he said, absolutely. He had the ability and he had the time. And so there's things like that, or this new administrative person that would be over this group. I would like to hold this reformation until July. And then in July, come out and say, well, money's coming in like crazy, everything worked out great, we're not in the middle of a recession, and we can go ahead and proceed with this formation if we feel that this is the right thing to do at the time. So that's something I don't know how we have that in the budget. I found, as I went through the budget, like a crazed woman, I did find a couple of things. There was, under Administration Services / Treasurer, there was a Director Information Technology. I don't know if that's the right thing, but it could be anywhere from $89,500 up to $134,000 for that individual. And then the Administration Services Officer, I don't know if that's going to be the individual you'd like to see over that grouping. But, you know, if they're going to, if that's the right line item, 89,000 to 134. And anytime you get an administrative person, to me, administrative head always pulls up visions of assistant. You know, they usually have an assistant. So I could see there being more money for this type of thing. And I'd like to see if there's, I don't know if we can change, how we have to do to change that, but my feeling would be that we change that particular item on our organizational chart and hold that until we know about the treasurer and we know about the things that are, you know, all of our money coming in. So that's just my question on that.
Okay. Did you have any response, or are you just taking it in, Administrator?
It depends if the commission wants an answer. First, for clarification, the analyst is not a financial analyst, but a management analyst. So while they focus on whatever analytics that need, similar to what we have in the Sheriff's Department, they're analysts. So it's not necessarily about finance, it's about performance analyst. So there are aspects of that particular position that are not truly just tied to finance that we really don't have in the organization at this point in time. With regard to the Administrative Services Officer, yes, it is over that particular grouping, and will also provide that area of expertise that we do not have on staff currently.
Okay. By the way, as we go forward, I would like to remind the Commission that we are, of course, looking at a deadline, which is, I believe, January 30. Is that not correct, for our statutory deadline? After that, I don't want to sound too alarmist, but there are serious considerations to whether we would have the ability to spend money beyond that. So I don't want to sound too many alarm bells, but I do want to emphasize that the deadline is an important one that we have to hit. I would also remind commission members that at last week's meeting, we instructed staff on what I think was purported to be the final instructions so they could prepare this document for us. So while obviously comments are always welcome and observations, I would caution commissioners about doing any adjustments that might push us out beyond our limits. And I would also say that staff, I think, has, during this process, and I'll say it again after we get finished, staff has done a good job of reflecting the requests of the commission and responded to the concerns that have been expressed. They've done a good job of making sure that they have gotten back to us in a prompt manner. And I would suggest that additional changes from here would not be well advised.
Well,
With
I'm
that,
not-
Commissioner, go ahead.
I'm not saying that we have to change the budget. All I'm saying is, can we hold off on making these changes until July? That's all I'm saying. You know, and I think it's pretty difficult for a group of new people. All the rest of you have been here, done that, comfortable with the budget book. For the public's sake, this is the budget book. This is what they hand us. And when we come in as a new commissioner, while it's well done, they're right. Diana and our auditor and the staff do a tremendous job doing this. Sit down and go through this and see if you can find all the little things in here which are unnecessary. You're not going to do it. And nobody's trying to hide anything in there. I don't mean that. It's just that it's a massive volume of stuff to go through. So we've done it. We've done all we can do, you know, in this short period of time. I'm not saying not do the budget. I'm saying delay some reorganization until July and look at that again. That's all I'm saying. Everybody was willing to do that for the sheriff. You know, say, oh, well, hold everything up, and no big deal. So I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that and then come back and visit it at that time.
No, and I didn't mean to imply that that remark was meant towards you. I wanted to kind of as a general statement because as far as I know, you didn't make any proposed changes. So it's just as a sort of general comment. Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you, and both comments by my colleagues are well taken. This is really more a request of the administrator, as we have talked about, and maybe I'm just looking forward to this. Maybe there's good pizza or donuts at this, I don't know. But when we have this retreat that we have talked about and you have talked about with the commission, I would just note that that is a great time to talk about, from an organizational standpoint, why we're going in these directions, why we want to add that, why that is a good thing for us, what our expectations are with that, and so whether, you know, whether then that elicits further questions or we say, okay, this is great, but let's do this in July. I won't belabor that point, but I think it is important as we're moving on into some new uncharted territory for this county, and there are a few of us who are just kind of coming in, absorbed with these books and all of that, to take that opportunity when we've talked about taking that opportunity and make this one of the subjects that we talk about there, so we have comfort and understanding of that direction. That would be my only suggestion. Thank you.
Commissioner Withington.
All right, thank you. Hey, so I plan to vote to approve this budget tonight, but I do have some questions as staff. When it comes to outside agencies that we give money to, when will those contracts be generated?
I would expect probably in the next 30 days typically is when they come through.
So how can we as a commission provide direction to you guys of what we want to see as deliverables and outcomes within those contracts?
what can be done is, do you have copies of the current contracts? Or
Yeah, I printed them off from, and it looks like when it comes to Northland Neighborhoods, Inc., it's just the same generic
Sure.
contract that is every year.
I mean, certainly one opportunity would be if you have them and you have specific changes, you certainly can send those in.
Okay.
I mean, you know, and this, again, would be an example of why we would do typically a two-meeting cycle, is that at the first meeting, you might be presented a contract, and then that's an opportunity for staff to get some feedback on perhaps what makes sense. And of course, with 7 of you, you've got to have some consensus on that, and then have that final product ready for the next meeting.
Okay. And last week, Commissioner Wagner and Commissioner Nolte, both you guys made a suggestion about possibly only paying or distributing half the funds. I like that idea. I think in the past, the commission has done a terrible job. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but I think in the past, the commission has done a terrible job at bringing these organizations before us and actually asking questions. I know for 8 years, I've asked commissioners how some of these organizations spent money, and I was always told, I don't know. I didn't get elected to tell my constituents, I don't know how your money's being spent. So that's why I requested that these outside agencies come and tell us how they're spending the money. If we didn't ask some questions, I don't think we would actually have found out how some of our money was being spent. So I've talked to some of the commissioners, and I would like to get consensus from the rest of the group. I say we only pay half the money now, if approved, to every outside agency. We have every outside agency provide us quarterly reports to the $1,000 on how that money was spent for that quarter. And then we ask every outside agency to come in July at mid-year and give us a detailed or a formal report like they did and tell us how they spent the half their money for those 6 months. And then we can decide if we're going to give them the rest of their money. So that's where I'm at. And I've talked to some of the commissioners, a lot, 3 or 4 of them that I've talked to, they like the idea. So that's where I would like to see us hold these outside agencies more accountable. I mean, when one comes in here and gives a presentation and basically tells us, hey, give us the money, then we'll go to our board and decide, that's, I can't do that. And I know that that organization, the EDC, ended up answering some questions, but had we not asked them to come in and give us a presentation, we would have given them $100,000 and we would not have known how they plan to spend that money. So I want to hold these outside agencies more accountable. I want more transparency. When it comes to NNI, Northland Neighborhoods, Inc., I still really don't know how that $75,000 was spent last year. We were told that it was all used to leverage money, leverage for funds for $75,000 for minor home repairs. But then we were also told by board member Darren Hinnon that $25,000 was going to pay for codes enforcement in Kansas City. So if $25,000 is going towards an expense, how can you leverage the whole thing for minor home repairs? So I want to hold these outside agencies more accountable. Like I said, I'm going to vote to approve this budget. There's a lot of good things in this budget. But I think we need to hold these outside agencies more accountable and make sure that they are more transparent. We need to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money. We hear about responsible budgeting, fiscal conservative, stuff like that. Well, I think holding these outside agencies accountable for how they're spending the taxpayer money goes along with that, so.
Thank you. Yeah, if I recall at our last meeting, in fact, we did reach consensus that and correct me if I'm wrong, Administrator, but that we would be make half those funds available. One of the conditions was that the questions posed by commissioners would be responded to, and the other half would be released in mid-year after another conversation, another presentation. Administrator, am I remembering that correctly?
So at the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion about doing that, and I think at least staff's takeaway was, as those contracts come forward to the commission for approval, then those specifications on how you want to proceed in those contracts about allocation, whether you do half or a quarter, the reporting and the expectations and the metrics would be discussed as part of that. So we didn't take away that it was a clear cut, 50 now, 50 later, but that it would be something that the commission would decide with each one of the individual contracts.
And further, of course, those monies would not be released in the absence of a contract. So that would also be another place to where, we could make sure that we had, put that into the agreement with these agencies at the time of the contract, because I don't know that we would contemplate releasing that money in the absence of a contract.
Correct. The only one I would highlight would be those that are statutory.
Yes.
University extension that were obligated under statutory requirements, but the other agencies are not under statutory requirement, and those would be contractual.
Exactly, yeah. There are some that we contribute to that it is not discretionary, but in fact a statutory requirement. Commissioner Lawson, and then I'll come to Commissioner Wagner.
I agree with Commissioner Withington that the people who are receiving the money should definitely be held accountable. However, I know that in some instances, yes, the money that comes in is used to leverage. I was pleased with the statement that NNI provided for us that really showed it was kind of like a balance sheet, and I felt pretty good about all of that came through. I've had a couple conversations with EDC as well and talked about a lot of things that they wanted to do. I think I would not like to see them held captive in that way, but I do think that come July, it would be good for them to just come in and say, okay, I want to tell you what we've done thus far. We do need to hold people accountable, but I don't feel with such short notice that we hold their money back like that. I'd like to see them both organizations get their money, but be held accountable and have to come back in July and at least give us an accounting for some things they've done. And that's great. They're happy to tell us, and we're happy to hear it. And, if things aren't right, then you can talk about doing something besides that. But right now, I think we release the money, in my opinion, humble opinion.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the comment about getting the budget done. I look forward to further sausage making when the contracts come forward. But I will request of our staff that, depending on what buckets dollars are being used for, sometimes you cause issue when you say half now, half later, and particularly if there is anything related to staff. Because if staff doesn't know we're in it for the full year, sometimes you have a situation where staff leaves because it is unknown, or if there's an attempt to hire staff, you get the issue of, well, can I sustain that staff over the year time period? You have that same problem even if you have an annual budget allocation, so I get it. But I guess what I would request is, as we are having these conversations with the individual organizations and bringing that forward to the commission, I do feel like we need, as a group, to have an idea of what our metrics and deliverables should be. But I also would like to hone in a little bit more as those contracts come forward as to what is it that we are paying for. Is this staff? Is this specialty programs? I think that kind of gets into not only what are we buying, but also what kind of risk do we create depending on how we go forward with the contract. And it would not surprise me. It would not surprise me if you had a little bit of a mix. But I think no matter what it is, that reporting piece is very important. So I'll throw out a little leeway for staff, I guess, is my point, because it sometimes depends on the expense. But I think the spirit, I think, is very reflective that we want to see more communication. Yeah, so thank you.
Very good. Any other comments from the commission on the budget, that is to say 2023 Ordinance 1A? Any members of the public wishing to comment on 2023 Ordinance 1A? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner,
Aye.
Commissioner Withington,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Very good. That brings us to our next issue, which is 2023 Ordinance 1B. Administrator?
2023 Ordinance 1B is an ordinance adopting the annual budget of Clay County, Missouri for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2023, and ending on December 31st, 2023, pursuant to Section 50.525 through 50.651 of the revised statutes of Missouri for all accounts associated with the operations of the Clay County Prosecutor's Office.
Are there any questions of the administrator before we go for a motion? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move for approval of 2023-ORD-1B.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023 Ordinance 1B. Discussion. Any commissioners wishing to comment on this ordinance at this time? Seeing none, is there anyone from the public who would wish to comment? Seeing none, you are recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner,
Aye.
Commissioner Withington,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
I'm going to recuse myself.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Very good. That completes the process of passing our budget, so thank you very much to staff, and I will expand on that during commissioner comments. That brings us to 2023-07. Administrator?
Resolution 2023-07 is approving ARPA funding for fee booth replacement in the parks. This will replace 6 fee booths in an amount not to exceed $185,000. Staff presented on this last week, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of the administrator or of staff on this issue? Is there a motion for 2023-07?
Move to pass 2023-07.
Motion's been made for the approval of 2023-07. Further discussion, seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner,
Aye.
Commissioner Withington,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
That brings us to 2023-08. Commissioner, Administrator, excuse me.
Resolution 2023-08 is approving ARPA funding for 7 CXT restroom replacements throughout the park system in an amount not to exceed $706,000. Again, staff presented on this last week, and they're available to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of staff on this issue? Seeing none, is there a motion on 2023-08?
Move to approve 2023-08.
Motion been made for the approval of 2023-08. Further discussion, seeing none, you're recognized to close.
I close.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Wagner,
Aye.
Commissioner Withington,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
That brings us to our discussion items. We have one item under discussion. Administrator, if you'd like to introduce that, we will get underway.
Yes, thank you. Last week, there was substantial discussion about planning and zoning items and how can we expedite the process. And so after some discussion, we indicated we would come back to the commission and provide to you information about some ideas about those projects, those cases that could be streamlined and could be considered in a single meeting versus different than what the past practice has been. So Director Jones is here to provide information to the commission.
Please proceed.
Kip Jones, Planning and Zoning Director. And Commissioner Nolte, you kind of burst my bubble, because during that other discussion, I sat over there thinking that my discussion item was the main event, but I guess not, so that's okay.
Well,
So,
it is, as always. It's all about you, sir.
well, I hope to entertain. So, and Commissioner Lawson, that slide is for you. So we're pulling the drapes back on our process. So, our cases last week, we obviously discussed if there were certain cases that we could streamline. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of background. This is the process we go through every month with our planning and zoning cases, and I've used next month's deadline and those dates to just give you an idea of when we do things and kind of how that process goes. So we always start with an application deadline. That's generally the first Monday of the month, and that's for a following month's Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. So in this case, our February deadline is February 6th. As soon as the applicants submit their paperwork, that's when myself and our staff start looking at that, making sure it's complete. We start creating the agenda. We start creating the notice that goes in the newspaper. We start creating the letters that go to utility companies and also the adjacent property owners that were required to send certified letters by the Land Development Code and also by the state statutes. About a week after we start sending all that stuff out, that's when we meet with the Technical Review Committee. If you'll remember, that's the committee where we get the Highway Department, the Health Department, the Fire District, all those entities together to make sure that we're creating buildable lots in most situations, that we're not creating any issues. Not too long after that is where we post a sign on the subject property. We don't have to do that by state statute, but that's an extra step so the neighbors do know, because not everybody reads the newspaper and not everybody signs for their certified letter. And then that whole month from when they apply to the end of the month is my staff is working on those reports that go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So in this case, we try to get those reports out about a week before the Planning and Zoning Commission, be the end of February in this instance, and that would go for a March 7th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Typically, Planning and Zoning will vote the night of, and then that case comes to County Commission generally 2 to 3 weeks later. This one's a little bit quicker just because of how the dates fall. If we were doing this normally, we would come to County Commission on the 15th and then come back for a second reading on the 29th. And then if it's a plat, that's when we get the recording copies of the plat, get the signatures, which include the presiding commissioner, myself, the planning and zoning commissioner, the county councilor, the clerk, all have to sign that plat before it's recorded. And there's some leeway there because that's driven by the applicant, because we could get the plat the next day, or they could wait a week or two before we get that plat. So that, just to give you an idea, that by the time we send the letters to the adjacent property owners to when we get to County Commission, the adjacent property owners have had a month or a month and a half to express any opposition to any case. So let's talk about cases that we could consider to do that in 1 week instead of 2 weeks. So staff thought it would be good to have some guidelines that all the cases should meet. So for any case to be considered for that one reading, we feel the following should be required. First one is that there's no opposition from adjacent property owners. Second one would be that there's no opposition from the city that's within 1.5 miles. Our code requires that we reach out to those cities for any case that's within 1.5 miles of that jurisdiction, and we wouldn't want any opposition. Third one would be no opposition from an outside agency, so fire district, highway department, health department. Fourth one would be that the developer agrees to all those conditions that you see in our staff report. Typically they do because we've gone over those with them, but there can be a rare instance where they don't. So let's talk about cases that this could apply to if we're just changing property lines. So it's a platted subdivision already, which means it's gone through our process, and 2 property owners just want to move property lines. We're not creating any additional lots. Generally, those don't have a whole lot of opposition. Second one would be combining lots. So you saw some of these earlier this month. Generally, not a whole lot of opposition, but they're platted, which means we have to replat it to show those new property lines. If it was unplatted, they don't have to go through that process, so that's why it's platted only. Third one would be subdivisions with 4 or fewer lots without infrastructure. So this would be your standard. I've got 40 acres. I'm creating 4 10-acre lots. Again, it would have to be no opposition from any of those neighbors, outside agencies, things like that as well. And the reason we picked 4 lots is our current code requires if you have 5 or more lots that you have to put in an interior street or you have to get an exemption from the highway department. Typically, if we go above that 4 lot range, that's, we may have opposition anyway, but if you get 5 or more, you're most likely going to have some opposition from neighbors because it affects them a little bit more. Conditional use permit renewals. So I'll use Carolyn's Pumpkin Patch as an example here. They've been renewed for a conditional use permit probably 4 or 5 times. If there's no complaints substantiated by staff, or, no major changes, then we think those could be approved in one reading as well. And then the last one I would say is a well water request. We saw one of those, I can't remember if it was, I think it was the end of last year. We don't get a whole lot of these. Generally, it's if the water district can't serve water to the lot. We get 1 or 2 of these, every 2 or 3 years. So that would be the recommendation of staff. These kind of cases, the way I think it probably would be best to do is we would put these on regular agenda, so we still present a report to the commission. We would submit an RCA that indicates, yeah, we think this could be immediate action. And then part of my comments would be, we feel that all these conditions have been met and that we would recommend that you consider approving this in one reading. So I think that's really quick, but that's kind of what we would propose, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or hear some comments.
Sure. Thank you very much. And it's obvious you guys gave this some good consideration. Would we be, at the time the agenda was published, is that when we would know whether or not they would be for passage that evening, as opposed to doing it spontaneously? So we would have, in other words, when we got the agenda, there would be an attached request that we take action for passage that day.
Yes, there would be an RCA that would indicate that we felt this met those conditions and immediate action could happen.
The other thing that I would like to kind of include, and I don't think it's going to happen very, very often, but I'd like to try to make sure that I'm watching out for any minority opinions on the commission, and that is, if a commissioner feels strongly that it should be considered more deeply for whatever reason, I would like to be able to honor those requests, but I can't think that they come up very often. I just like the idea that if a commissioner has an objection for whatever reason, that they have the ability to air that concern adequately. So,
That's a great point. I think we could add unanimous vote by Planning and Zoning Commission.
Let me jump in. In order to pass anything on the first read,
of course,
it has to be unanimous anyway. So one commissioner, for whatever reason, could just say, no, I really need this to go to another read. It would, and it could pass on the second read unanimously without a problem, or even just a simple majority. But for it to be passed first read, it does have to be unanimous.
so the procedure would be if it was on that list, and during the course of discussion, one commissioner said, I'm really not comfortable with this, it could be moved rather than go ahead and take the vote and end up doing it that way. I mean, would that, I guess what I'm saying is, if you guys can work out procedure on that, I'm happy whichever way it goes.
Well, it's really, I would hope that the way it would work, without it being too formal, is it's on regular agenda to begin with.
Right.
And it comes up, and the recommendation from staff is this could be done on first reading. You might suggest, is everybody okay with this going on first reading tonight? And if any commissioner says, no, I'd prefer it not, then simply we would treat it as anything else on regular, move it to the next agenda.
Okay, so
we could force a vote, I guess, but it seems unnecessary.
It does seem very unnecessary, and it seems kind of clunky, so what I want to make sure is that the recommendations from staff are in fact those and don't lock us in if we prefer to change it differently without having to go through too many hoops.
And I guess there might be a slight distinction between a recommendation of staff and staff saying this could go on.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if you're going to make that distinction between things you feel should or you want to go on first reading versus things that could go on first reading. And again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds tonight on that, but I think that could come up as well.
The thing is, it strikes me as something that would be relatively rare. I want to take into account, but it strikes me as most of the time there would be a sense, and in fact, when we get our agenda in advance, if a commissioner did have some concerns about a particular issue, that could be made in advance of publication, between the time we get the agenda and publication, if that were the case. So, I mean, there are ways to work around it. I just wanted to make sure that those considerations were included in our discussion. Further discussion, Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. No, Mr. Jones, I will say that this, no questions today, of course, but the list of recommendations from staff, I think this is perfect. I think this is a great way to move forward with some non-controversial items. As we have seen over the number of years, we've had a lot of those that are just easy. We can get those through. But I will say, you have also done a terrific job of having adequate, more than adequate, conversations with us, at least, and I'm hoping this will continue as we have more, a little more heated conversations, a little more in-depth planning and zoning matters, because you've done a terrific job the past couple of years, at least communicating with us and letting us know and kind of what to expect. So,
Thank you.
say that. So, keep up the good work, Kip.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Well, I will echo the thanks, Kip, and the good work you've done. And I appreciate you tugging at the heartstrings of my colleague with your title slide. And I also want to thank Commissioner Johnson for bringing this forward and asking for this discussion today. My only question to you has to do with the county's land use plan, because I did not see fidelity with the plan as one of those things on the list, knowing that it's old, and in the budget we just passed, we're going to go do a new one, so maybe that's why it's not up there. But I guess my question is, do the other things on that list essentially take care of that, or do you deal with that a different way?
So I would say any case that we would recommend, approval on the first reading would have gotten staff approval, which, one of the initial things we do, even before somebody applies, is look at the comp plan, look at the land development code, and make sure that case meets those requirements. So obviously, we wouldn't recommend that something be approved at any point, whether it's first reading or second reading, without it being compliant with the LDC and the comp plan.
And just so I understand, when it goes through that process, before it really goes through, that fidelity to that plan is something you're already looking at, and you would say to an applicant, well, that's really not in the plan, so we're not going to suggest that. Now, that it still may go through that process, but you would not be recommending that to us if that issue were to occur.
Correct. So we do a pre-application meeting pretty much with every case, where we try to weed out the cases that don't meet the comp plan or the land development code requirements. I think we do a pretty good job of that. We try to find a way for people to do what they want to do, but it has to fit within those guidelines. So that's why typically you'll see staff is recommending approval on most cases presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission, because we've been able to weed out those cases that don't meet the requirements.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jones. Can you go back to your timeline slide?
Mike, can you do that for me? The
second one
clicker is
there.
not working. 2 slides, I think.
That's the one. Oh, I like that.
No, I didn't do that. Mike did that time.
That's all I wanted to see, was just the curtains being pulled back. Okay, a couple of questions for you. First, technical review committee meeting. So is that the first time you give a presentation to us that I see? Do you show that same presentation to them?
No, we pull out the plat. Generally, if it's a plat, we'll pull out the big plat and discuss, with highway, we'll discuss driveway entrances, or if it has interior streets, we'll discuss that.
Okay.
Fire district will discuss where the hydrants should go, things like that.
So more technical stuff, nothing
Yes.
fancy. So then when you get to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, that's when you have a presentations.
Yes,
So
sir.
that presentation is presented to PZC, and then it comes to the commission, and in the past, it's been presented to us twice, right? And so what we're gonna do here is at least eliminate the second one if we fall into all these categories we're talking about. Now, this might sound like a really naive question, and I think I know the answer, but I really want some thought on this. What is the difference between what we do and what Planning and Zoning Commission does?
At Planning and Zoning Commission, we kind of dig in a little bit deeper. So their report's a little bit different than what the county commission gets. It contains a lot of the same material, but we tend to have a more detailed discussion of the cases, especially if it's a case that has infrastructure or it's a conditional use permit. So I would say that's the biggest difference, is it's a little more detailed and we dig down a little bit deeper.
Okay, and a very necessary step
Yes.
in the process. So I'm all about government efficiencies, and I'm all about ways that we can waste less taxpayers' money and time, as well as our staff's time. So I appreciate everything you presented. Is there anything else that you can think of that would help us streamline these processes that you'd like to see?
Well, I would like to say, we would like to see if there's a further way to do some of that. So maybe take some of these cases and either present them just to the Planning and Zoning Commission and not have to come to County Commission, or have there be an administrative step where it can just be approved by staff. But we have to find a way to do that within the state statutes. So we're working on that. I just don't have enough information to tell you if we're able to do that.
Okay, I appreciate this. That's something you are working on.
Yes.
Great, I appreciate
Just no
that.
promises on
No, it's just-
what happens.
I just think we should always be reevaluating how we do things. And just because we've done it this way in the past doesn't mean we need to keep doing it that way. It's what is the most efficient way to get things done, I think. And so I appreciate you doing that. Thank you for this.
Further comments? Commissioner Lawson?
Just one quick thing. I really do appreciate you working on this, because I felt terrible for those couple of people that were here a couple weeks ago, and they had to come back, would have had to come back again this week. So to streamline this and you taking the time to do it, thank you very much. Appreciate it a lot.
Commissioner Wagner?
Thank you. This is well, no, I've probably asked a lot of dumb questions tonight, so I'll just add this to the others. And maybe again, more for the county councilor. It's interesting, Kip, when you mention some of the issues that you can potentially do administratively. I know in my time in Kansas City, those were some of the issues that were tackled there within city planning. I guess my question is there much difference in the authorities granted to the county in these sorts of matters than they are to cities? And maybe that's one you come back with, but that's an intriguing thought, and I know that we did some things in Kansas City. Not a lot, because it's kind of a tight thing as far as the decision-making power administratively versus the legislative body is concerned. But I do feel like there was some latitude in my experience. I just don't know if that extends to the county as I'm trying to divorce myself from what cities can do and what counties can do, and I'm still working on it. I'm a work in progress, but I don't know if that may be something that could inform that particular discussion, because I think there is some opportunity there.
Yeah, I appreciate the point well taken. So when Kip said earlier that we are having active discussions, he wasn't kidding. We
Okay.
met earlier today. in
Okay,
fact.
good, great.
So we are actually working through this. Now that we have a full county commission, we're really looking at ways that we can move the planning process quicker, and perhaps even take advantage of some statutes that have previously not applied to us.
Very
So
good.
we are absolutely working on it, and that is a real focus. And one of the points being that Kip, I think, really is focusing on is, are there things that can be approved administratively?
Exactly.
With the appropriate parameters and guidance from the commission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much. Do you feel as though you've gotten a flavor for the commission's thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, I know everybody wants to hear me talk more, but I think I'm good. Thank you.
We could go on for literally seconds more. Sorry about that. Very good. That brings that discussion to an end. That brings us to county administrator comments.
Just briefly, the next meeting of the commission will be Wednesday, February the 1st at 3 o'clock here in the chambers. And the only other last item is Go Chiefs.
Okay. Commissioner comments. Commissioner Johnson.
Just a big thank you to staff. I know this is our county administrator's first budget, but congratulations. You're done. The budget's done for the year.
It's time to start on the next one.
That's right. Time to start this. But you guys did a great job. A lot of things were thrown in the mix here with a new commission coming in halfway, and all the things that we threw in at you. You handled it magnificently. And I thought you and your staff and Victor Hurlbert and his staff, I just commend all of you and thank you very much for a job well done.
Commissioner Thompson.
I will just echo the comments of Commissioner Johnson that thank you to our county administrator. I know she's been working very hard and diligently on this budget, and it has not been no small feat. And then she gets all seven of us with our opinions and trying to do whatever we can to make our county better at the same time. But our budget team is also terrific. The county auditor and all of our offices and departments and elected officials, they did a great job. So once again, thank you all, and that's all I got.
Commissioner Carpenter?
No comments, thank you.
Commissioner Wagner?
Good job, everyone. Thank you for taking all the questions. Thank you for your patience in getting through these various issues and questions. I'm appreciative of this group because we got a lot of energy and we want to try to do the right thing, and sometimes that requires weird votes. But nevertheless, I think we're all trying to go in the right direction. I'm very excited about that. And I don't know what else we do because all we've done so far is budgets. And so I'm looking forward to the next big sausage-making experience. The administrator is correct. Go Chiefs.
Commissioner Lawson?
The only thing is, I do thank the staff very much. Anytime I've needed anything, I can go to any of them. Everybody is wonderful. And I sincerely appreciate my fellow commissioners. Strange as some of them are, they really are a good group of people, and we all work well together. We may not always agree, but everybody's able to get past that and go on to the next project. So thanks a million for everything that the staff does, and thank all of you for being so wonderful.
Commissioner Withington? And I'll just wrap it up and say thank you so much for the staff and everyone who worked so hard on this budget. And I would just I think I made the observation before and I'll make it again, and that is that with 4 new commissioners coming on, there are a lot of questions, and I think it's a very positive experience. I think the fact that it may take a little longer is a more than worthwhile price to pay to have full engagement by all commissioners and to make sure that they realize that their views are going to be heard. This process has been getting better and better over the past years, and I'm very confident that as we go forward and we go through our planning process and some of the other issues that we go through this year, we're going to be able to come back with an even better process for budget next year as we become accustomed to working with one another. So thank you to every commissioner here for your engagement, for your ability to look at things with fresh eyes, and golly, I just can't wait till next budget. With that will, on that rather weird note, that will bring us to recess and adjournment.